Hey guys, welcome back to Elevate Your Soul. Today we are continuing with the part 3. Becoming increasingly overwhelmed by illusion, Purañjana remained always lying down with his head on the pillow of his wife's arms. Due to considering a woman to be his very life and soul, he could not understand the meaning of self-realization. A woman is called Pramada, which means enlivening as well as maddening. In other words, a beautiful wife can be enlivening as well as the cause of degradation. His heart filled with lust, King Purañjana begot 1,100 sons and 110 daughters in the womb of his wife, Puranjani. And in this way, his youthful life passed as if it had been just a moment. Then, to increase his dynasty, Purañjana got all of his children married so that gradually the whole city of Panchala became overcrowded with his grandchildren. The city represents Purañjana's body and his sons and grandsons represent the reactions of his pious and impious actions. In other words, when the living entity is inclined toward sexual activity, he becomes involved in hundreds and thousands of actions and reactions. As they grew up, the sons and grandsons gradually became plunderers of King Purañjana's wealth and possessions to which he had become very attached. Narada said, "My dear King Prācīnabarhi, like you, King Purañjana became implicated in so many material desires. As a result, he worshipped various demigods by the performance of sacrifices that were all ghastly due to the necessity of killing animals. Being a Vaishnava, Narada wanted to stop the king's animal killing in the name of performing sacrifices. Such rituals are in the mode of ignorance and are not transcendental religion, and so by performing them, one forgets the goal of life. Finally, while remaining attached to fruitive activities as well as to his family, King Purañjana arrived at a stage of life that is not very much liked by those who are overly attached to material things. There is a Gandharva king named Chandavega. Chandavega means very swiftly passing and thus represents time, who employs 360 powerful soldiers, which are the days, and as many Gandharvis, nights, to constantly plunder one's duration of life and attendant facility for sense enjoyment. When Chandavega and his followers began attacking Purañjana's city, the five-hooded snake defended it. Being the superintendent and protector of the city, the serpent fought with the 720 Gandharvas single-handedly and so gradually became very weak. When King Purañjana and his friends and citizens, the bodily limbs, saw this, they became overwhelmed with anxiety. Meanwhile, the daughter of time, named Jara or Kalakanya, was searching for her husband throughout the three worlds. Although no one would agree to accept her, she was anxious to marry anyone. Narada informed King Prācīnabarhi, "Once as I was coming to the earth from Brahmaloka, Jara happened to meet me. Knowing that I am an unvowed brahmachari, she became very lusty and begged me to accept her. However, when I refused her request, Jara very angrily cursed me, saying, 'You will never be able to stay in one place for a long time.' Then, at my suggestion, she approached the Yavana king, Bhaya, and requested him to become her husband. After meeting Bhaya, Jara said, 'My dear hero, you are the best of the untouchables. I am in love with you, and so I want you to accept me as your wife. One who does not give or accept charity according to the injunctions of Shastra is certainly foolish and will have to lament later on. Here I am present before you and ready to serve you. Please be merciful and accept me, for it is the duty of a gentleman to be compassionate towards one who is distressed. The king of the Yavanas smiled, and after much consideration, he replied, "On behalf of Providence, I will engage you in imperceptibly attacking all people along with my soldiers. Here is my elder brother Prajvara, the 107 Fahrenheit fever sent by Lord Vishnu, who you may accept as your husband." To make the best use of a bad bargain, the Yavana king wanted to serve Lord Krishna by introducing Jara, a Kalankanya, everywhere. In old age, when one is attacked by invalidity, he becomes afraid of death, and thus Jara serves as an impetus for spiritual life. Thereafter, Yavana Raja Bhaya, or the Lord of Death, Yamaraja, began traveling all over the world along with Prajvara, Kalakanya, and his soldiers, and when they came to Purañjana city, they attacked it very forcefully. Due to Purañjanas having lived a life of sense gratification, the old serpent that protected his city had become very weak. When Kalakanya attacked the city, she soon rendered the citizens useless for all purposes. In old age, the bodily limbs become useless, and the soldiers of Yavana Raja, by entering the 9 gates, gave her support. In old age, diseases manifest at the 9 gates. Due to being embraced by Kalakanya, Being Purañjana gradually lost all his beauty, intelligence, and opulence, and thus the Gandharvas and Yavanas easily conquered him. While observing how everything in his city was becoming scattered, Purañjana also found that his wife, sons, grandsons, servants, and ministers had become cold and indifferent, so that they no longer hesitate to oppose him. During old age, the senses and organs become weak, so that instead of being under a person's control, they oppose him. He wants to use our senses for sense gratification, and they must receive strength from the body. In the same way, one keeps family members for enjoyment, while they also demand enjoyment from the head of the family. When the old man cannot supply sufficient money, the family members turn against him. This certainly made King Purañjana very anxious, but still he could not counteract the situation, being overwhelmed by Kalakanya. Due to her influence, the objects of sense enjoyment had become tasteless. Although Purañjana's lusty desires continued to bind him with affection for his wife and children, in this way King Purañjana became very poor-hearted and completely devoid of an understanding of life's real aim. Finally, although he had no desire to do so, King Purañjana was forced to leave his city because it had been completely smashed by Kalakanya. Even a worm in the stool does not want to give up its position, especially if one has no information about the next life or the kingdom of God. He will not want to give up his body even after it has become old and useless. At this time, Prajvara set fire to Purañjana's city to please his younger brother. At the time of death, the temperature is raised to 107 degrees Fahrenheit. When King Purañjana saw how all his family members, servants, and citizens were being consumed in the conflagration, he became very morose. The city's police superintendent, the serpent, the subtle body and life air, also became very aggrieved to see how his residence had been set ablaze. And due to the severe heat, he wanted to leave the city. Just as a snake living within the cavity of a tree hopes to escape when there is a forest fire. However, when the serpent attempted to leave the city, he was checked by the enemy, and so he began to cry out loudly in anguish. At the time of death, the gates of the body become choked up, and so one cannot clearly express his difficulties to others. King Purañjana was overly attached to his family due to having the false conception of I and mine, so that at the time of separation he became very sorry. After I leave this body, who will take care of her, and how will she maintain her dependence? Purañjana began thinking of his past dealings with his wife, how she would never eat nor bath until he had done so, how much attached she had been to him, and how she used to pout when he would sometimes chastise her. He thought of how she used to give him good advice and how she became very aggrieved when he was away from home. As part and parcel of Lord Krishna, Purañjana should have been thinking of him. Instead, he was absorbed by thinking of a woman, and then, as he lamented over the fate of his wife and children, Yavana Raja came there to arrest him. As the Yavanas were binding Purañjana like an animal to take him away to the place of judgment, his followers became very aggrieved, and in that state they were also forced to accompany their master. When the Yamadutas take away a living entity, the life, air, senses, desires, and reactions to his past activities all follow him. As soon as the king and his subjects were out of the city, it immediately became dismantled and smashed to dust. And yet, even as he was being dragged away by the Yavana king, due to ignorance, Purañjana could not remember his friend and well-wisher, the Supreme Soul. Taking advantage of cruel Purañjana's helpless condition, all the animals he had killed in sacrifice came and pierced him with their horns, and thus it felt to him as if he were being hacked to pieces with axes. As a result of having to quit his body while remembering his wife, Purañjana took his next birth as a very beautiful daughter of the king of Vidarbha. He was well pleased due to his past pious work. After coming of age, it was arranged that Vaidarbhi would marry King Malayadhwaja of the Pandu country. The king's name indicates that he was a great devotee who stood as firm as the Malaya hill. With his devotional flag unfurled, he stood fast in order to conquer all other spiritual conceptions and thus convert others to become as fixed up in devotional service as himself. King Malayadhwaja begot a black-eyed, signifying that her eyes were always fixed upon Krishna, daughter through his wife Vaidarbhi, as well as 7 sons representing the 7 processes of devotional service in practice, who later on became kings of Dravida Desha. The sons of Malayadhwaja gave birth to many thousands of children, and they ruled the earth up until the end of Manu's life and even beyond. The great sage Agastya, meaning the mind which controls the senses, married Malayadhwaja's daughter, who represents the path of devotional service, and their son was named Dhradachyuta. By great determination, one never falls down. On later on begot a son named Idhamavaha, one who carries wood for his spiritual master. In other words, when devotional service is performed with controlled senses, one becomes fixed in his determination to satisfy the spiritual master. After some time, King Malayadhwaja divided the kingdom amongst his sons, and then so that he could worship Lord Krishna with full attention, he retired to a secluded place known as Kulachala. When his disciples are grown up and able to preach, the spiritual master should divide the world amongst them and then retire so that he can write books and execute Nirjana Bhajana, the silent worship of the Lord. In spite of having children, Queen Vaidarbhi also gave up the comforts of home life and followed her husband to the forest. Similarly, some of the advanced disciples should follow the spiritual master to serve him as he executes Nirjana Bhajana. By bathing in the rivers Chandravasa, Tamraparni and Vatodaka, which flow through the Kulachala province, Malayadhwaja became purified externally and internally. Because of performing austerities while eating only bulbs, seeds, leaves, flowers, roots, fruits, and grass, the king eventually became very skinny. But at the same time, he conquered the dualities of heat and cold, and happiness and distress, as well as the pangs of hunger, thirst, and the onslaughts of nature. The next part will be continued in the next video. Radhe Radhe.